All right, everyone, how are you? Welcome to this week's episode of our podcast. It's called Is Breakfast Included? Thanks for stopping by. On the show this week, I sit down with my friend Drew Stone. Drew is a film director, a producer, author, and musician known for fronting the band Incendiary Device out of New York City. He's known for films like the New York Hardcore Chronicles, plus Who the Is That Guy? The Fabulous Journey of Michael Alagos. Drew took some time to sit down with me. We talked about his time at Immersion, his discovery and love for hardcore music, what led him to be a film director, and what he likes for breakfast. It was a great conversation, and Drew is probably one of the most interesting people I've ever met. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Let's check it out. Tell everyone who you are.
Oh, my name is Drew Stone. I am a New York born and raised filmmaker, musician, and author, and host of the New York Hardcore Chronicles Live, which is basically a show much like this, an internet video cast that has garnered quite a healthy audience in the past couple of years.
Right on, man. Yeah. I met you several months back at Generation Records. Danny Marianino was doing a book signing, and you walked in. We have never met. You walked right up to me and you said, "Hi, I'm Drew," and I thought, "Oh, that's pretty cool, this guy." And we have a mutual friend, TJ Hoffman, and I asked him if he knew you, and man, you have done so much in your life. Like I don't think we can fit it all in one conversation. But we'll try to touch on the highlights.
Let's try.
Or we could touch on the lowlights.
Yeah. Well, how about we do a little of each?
Yeah, that'd be great. So you grew up in New York. Your father is Artie Stone. Mm-hmm. What was it like growing up in that house of an Academy Award winner?
Well, my dad has an interesting story. He grew up in the Bronx and in an orphanage in the Lower East Side of New York City. He had a really rough and tumble childhood, kind of, just one of those, poverty-stricken early, 1940 depression type stories. Mm-hmm. His dad walked out on the family. His mother got ill, and no one to take care of him. He ended up in an orphanage in the Lower East Side, and he was there for a while, and then he came out and he ran in a crew, sort of like a Jewish street gang called the Stallions. Uh-huh. And my dad was sort of an infamous character in the streets of the Bronx. And he credits the Army, he went into the Army at turning his life around. And a guy that was sort of heading in a really bad direction and getting involved with a lot of really bad people. He went into the Army, and it really instilled some discipline and an incredible work ethic in him. And when he came out of the Army, he had a couple of jobs, and actually one of his first jobs was he had a job in the garment business, pushing cart around, but he ended up with a job at boxing matches. Uh-huh. Boxing matches used to be shot in film. And after each round, they would download the film and give that roll of exposed film to a messenger who would run it to the lab. And this is so my dad's first job in the film business, by chance, was like a messenger running film to the lab. And from there, he sort of just got connected and made his way up the ladder and eventually became a film director. And he had a company, a company in the 60s, and he had some success in the 60s. He won an Academy Award for Best Short Film in 1963, along with a guy named Mel Brooks, for producing a film called The Critic, which you could see on YouTube. But to answer your question a little bit, now that I'm giving you a little background, my dad came from very humble beginnings, and growing up around him was great. And I was on a lot of film sets
Uh-huh.
as a young person, and I was exposed to seeing my father work with a lot of people. And it's funny you should mention how we met, because it is just that is something that was passed down to me from my father. My father ran a very unorthodox film set, and my father, whereas back then, film sets were like quiet on the set, and and it was very, you know, those people didn't speak to these people, and my dad was pioneered a very different kind of film set where basically everybody was welcome and everyone's input was welcome. And my dad would walk onto a film set and walk up to, if there was somebody on there he didn't see, he'd walk up and say, "Hey, my name's Arnie. I'm Arnie Stone." And it's interesting you should bring that up, because this is what I saw as a young person, how my dad treated people and
Uh-huh.
worked with people. And that's something I've carried into my life and into my adulthood. And but seeing him work with actors, my dad did a lot of commercials in the '70s, and saw him work with a lot of actors, man, and just saw how my dad worked with people and how he treated people. And my dad was and is, he's still with us. He's going to be 92. He's a beloved figure. He gave a lot of people their start in the film business. And so, yeah, I was exposed to this stuff growing up. And as a teenager, and then early on, I did some acting in plays and modeling as a kid and as a teenager. And I went to Emerson College to study acting as a teenager, uh, as a freshman.
Yeah.
And of course, that's where the story sort of goes, woo! And that's where music, comes into it, right?
Yeah. Well, it's sad that I have to say that what we just talked about is a very forgotten trait.
Okay.
I met Danny did this show, and then he reached out. He said, "Hey, I'm going to be doing a signing. You should come out." And I came out, and Vinny and Mike showed up. They were very cordial. They introduced themselves. You came up and like I said, it's something people don't do anymore.
Yeah.
People, you go in a room full of strangers and nobody wants to communicate. Nobody wants, So but what I thought was being an outsider in that group, because everyone seemed to know each other,
Right. Right.
made me feel really welcome. By the time I left, everyone knew my name and we were,
Yeah.
making plans and stuff. So
Yeah.
that's why I was intrigued with you and looked
Th-
you up immediately.
This is I believe this is important in this slow and wretched life that we lead,
Yeah.
in this everyone, the technology and the iPhone and the this and the that and the AI. It's like, this is high tech. This is what's high tech.
Yeah.
You know, this is bullshit, man. So there's no, the there's no, there's the human touch is where it's at. The human interaction, the community and the culture. That's what's up. All
Yeah.
this other stuff is just smoke and mirrors, man. As far as I'm concerned,
No,
you know.
I agree. I
Yeah,
agree. I think community is so
yeah.
important,
And listen, that's I've built a career on it, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you mentioned going into acting at Emerson, and did you were any of did your life parallel your dad's at any point with the gangs, and did you get into any of that?
Well,
You came up in New York around time when there were still lots of
well,
gangs.
I kind of look at it like I grew up as part of the blank generation. I call it. I grew up in New York City, in the mid, early to mid to late '70s,
Mhm.
and it was, being a young person there. It was like I was too um, too young for the Woodstock thing and all that, but I was too young, too old for like what came later as the MTV generation. I was part of this sort of couple of years there where we struggled for identity. Like, what were we a part of? In the early '70s. You
Hmm.
know, so I remember New York and being a young person. And my dad and my mom split when I was 9. So and I was raised, my dad was around, but a single mom, and I had a lot of free reign. So as a young person, I I had a lot of I didn't have a lot of rules and regulations on my head. So I spent a lot of time exploring the streets of New York City and hanging out with a lot of people
Yeah.
and unfortunately, in some regard getting into some not so great stuff, which is, coming up in the '70s, part of the culture that I was very much exposed to was drugs and alcohol and that kind of stuff. So growing up in New York City and all that, and yes, a lot of rough and tumble individuals and all that. But eventually I went to Boston to Emerson to study acting. When I managed to pull a rabbit out of the hat because I got into a whole bunch of trouble as a teenager, got thrown out of a couple of schools. I got thrown out of John F. Kennedy High School in the Bronx. That is a feat in itself, you know? And but I ended up pulling out of it at the like pulling out of the nosedive at the
Yeah.
last kind of minute there, and managed to get into a different school, and had some good grades and got into Emerson, and went into Emerson, and then things sort of took a different turn.
Yeah. So there was kind of a parallel. Your dad went to the army, got it together. You went, yeah.
Yeah.
What drew you to the hardcore scene?
Well, community and culture, kids my age. You know, before I went to my first hardcore show, music to me was something that was very distant and very untouchable. It was like idol worship. The bands that I first came up on like that I was into were like the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, the Grateful Dead, the Allman Brothers Band, um, and stuff like that. And these were bands a little bit older than me, and just no accessibility whatsoever, none.
Yeah.
So when I went to my first hardcore show and I saw it was kids my age, and then when that first show was over, they approached me because they were so interested in who I was. Wow, a new face. It was such a small, embryonic scene at the time, 1981.
Hmm.
Um, then you know, it was a real awakening of wow, it's kids my age, and the message was, uh, get up, get out, and make it happen. You can do it. Everybody was involved, uh, men and women, or should I say at the time, boys and girls alike.
Right.
And there was a lot of gals and guys, and it was us against them, and it was a really halcyon, exciting, vibrant time in music, and I just really jumped right into it.
Yeah. And when did you join your first band?
When I was in Boston, the first show I went to was a band called SSD Control, and then that part of that early Boston hardcore scene was like SSD Control, Gangrene, Jerry's Kids, FUs, um, DYS came a little bit later, and I at a place called Newberry Comics. I think I answered like an ad, looking for a bass player, and I joined these kids, but my bass playing wasn't up to snuff. But I kind of had the biggest mouth and had the most to say, which is how people ended up being singers of hardcore bands back then. And I ended up in a band which called the COs, which later became the Mighty COs, and we played a bunch of shows in Boston with those other bands, and it just kind of set me on my way musically, um, and just it was like I said, it was an exciting time. we made our own flyers. We booked our own little places to play, and we went out and we pasted the flyers. And it was very early on in the game, and there wasn't a lot of reference uh, material, and,
Yeah.
and there wasn't like, there was a couple of skinheads in Boston at the time. There was us. It wasn't like now when, it's just, you see someone with a tattoo on their face like this, and it's like, yeah, whatever. You know, Back then, if you shaved your head, the only people that were shaving their heads back then were like Marines and psychopaths. So if you shaved your head in Boston, which is kind of a notorious college town and a bit of a rough and tumble place, in 1981, you were asking for trouble. And so those early days were full of adventure.
When you reference like a skinhead, what was that scene like? Because of course you talk to someone with no knowledge of the hardcore
Right.
scene and you say skinhead, their mind immediately goes somewhere else. you
Sure.
know so
Sure.
what was it like?
Yeah.
Was there any of that going on?
Well, for me, in that scene, in the early '81 scene, a lot of the bands and scenes that influenced us were like the DC scene was big with us, like Minor Threat
Uh-huh.
and those bands. And this was what later became, American hardcore. And hardcore, the word hardcore didn't exist back then.
No.
But but in retrospect, American hardcore, and we certainly weren't aligned with the sort of Nazi racist skinhead ideology. That was not even on our radar screen. That stuff, I mean, we were more in line with the dead Kennedys. Can I curse on the show? Is that all
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We were more in line with, dead Kennedys, Nazi punks, fuck off, and that type of thing. So this was like a new American genre. We were American skinheads. I know there was a lot of, but of we were skinheads of this first wave of American hardcore.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And so you after Boston, when did you make your way back to New York?
So what happened was that I was studying acting at Emerson, and it was really hard to be focused when I was a part of this parallel universe that was going on, the Boston hardcore scene, which was exciting and vibrant. And I was in a band and we were doing things, and the community and the culture was exciting. And then I had to go sit in class the next day. And, part of it, I mean, in retrospect, it's a bit of a shame, but I was young, a little immature, and I was going for the temporary sense gratification, so to speak, and just intoxicated with what was happening. At the time, I felt that it was something special was going on. I did.
Uh-huh.
I really did. I really felt that it was special and it was important, and to a certain extent, it should be documented. I At the time somewhat, but certainly now in retrospect, I like it's akin to like the Summer of Love in like 1967 in San Francisco. It was a young person's movement, and that I felt it was important and special, and I was really caught up in it, and it just became really hard to like do schoolwork and go into
Yeah.
class. And part of it was I knew a little bit about the film business and how things worked because I kind of grew up around it. So, I found myself in like a class where they were like telling me stuff about film equipment that I already knew, and I was sort of like, the bottom line is, as an actor, I didn't have the discipline at the time. I just didn't.
Uh-huh.
I didn't have the discipline. I thought it was going to be easy. I thought I could sort of James Dean my way, Jack Nicholson my way through it. Like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm like that cool guy from New York. And Emerson was very competitive, very intense, and it was a bit of a shock. So I lasted 3 semesters and then bowed out, stayed for another half a year, and then came back to New York in the summer of '83. So I was up in Boston, basically give or take 2 years, all the while coming back and forth to New York. And I came back to New York in the summer of 1983, and I started a band called The High and the Mighty, and a hardcore band called The High and the Mighty, and we started playing places like A7 and CBGB and all that. And from there, after a while, I met a lot of people, and from there, I joined a band called Antidote, and then that carried on from there.
Yeah. Well, what you said earlier that you felt like it was something special, it really was something special. A new scene coming up that really, unless you were in it, you had never seen anything like that. I grew up in Texas, and the heaviest, I didn't find out about hardcore until hearing about the Cro-Mags, and that was several years in. And we did that I know of. I don't think we had a hardcore scene.
Yeah, I think it's legit to say, like, a lot of these early hardcore scenes, I was kind of a product of the environment. It was, especially coming back here to New York in the Lower East Side. It was like it was a pretty intense world down there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even like I mentioned, playing A7. A7 was an after hours place that didn't even open to midnight, totally illegal. Dave, the owner, was paying the cops at the 7th precinct off. These were like real, it was like going into like downtown Beirut and putting on and playing music. And it was awesome.
Yeah, there's a part of your New York Hardcore Chronicle documentary where they're like, there was a show here every night, and if there wasn't one, we made one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. In the New York Hardcore Chronicles film that I directed, we go back to the old A7 with Roger Moret and Vinny Stigma from Agnostic Front. And what's awesome is, Roger's walking in there for the first time in many, many, many years. And it's a great segment of that film. I love that film. That's one of the favorite films I've done. That film still,
You see it in Roger when he's walking in.
Yeah.
He looks, he's like, was that there?
Yeah.
The DJ booth, was it here? Was it, you could see it, and you could see it in both of them's face.
It's a magic moment. It's great.
It is.
As a filmmaker, once in a while, you strike gold, you mine gold, and that was one of them.
And my two favorite segments of that movie, I don't want to get off track, but that and The Journeyman.
Sure. Craig Satari's story.
Craig Satari's story, man, is so, I related to that.
Are we going to talk about the films? Are we?
We could. Yeah.
All right. So I'll refrain from getting into it now with the films.
Well, that was my next question. How did you? You said you wanted to document it once you got in it. Did your music involvement in the hardcore scene influence your documentaries or your filmmaking from then on?
Well, of course, 100%. Of course. I mean, when I was in the middle of it, I tried to bring a camera around. I felt like it was important. So I did shoot a lot of pictures in my own sort of primitive, like, 110, style, like, or I had a Canon Sure shot. I mean, I didn't, in retrospect, I so wish I would have taken more pictures, but I did take a bunch of pictures, and I did shoot some video footage, and I did save a bunch of stuff. So I felt like this is important. It should be documented somewhat. It wasn't until, later that I circled back and did documentaries about this stuff. But the way that came to be, the way that I became a documentary filmmaker was 100% because of my journey through the hardcore scene. I mean, and the people I met there. I ended up circling back, and that's how that all came to be. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your film, The New York Hardcore Chronicles. Like, if you haven't seen it, it's a great documentary, and you capture it with the grit that was your documentaries have a certain amount of grit to them,
Thanks.
and you film them unapologetically. Like there's
Well,
no
it works for films like the grit works when you're doing a New York hardcore film.
yeah
And it worked when, we did the XXX All Ages, XXX, the Boston hardcore film.
yeah
So that was one of the things that actually worked, is that I don't want to make a film that's too slick about the hardcore scene,
yeah
right? And because I went that route with it, it resonated with a lot of people. But the reason that those films, or one of the reasons that those films resonate so much with people, is because of my accessibility to the people and to the material. I wasn't an outsider coming in and making a film about the New York hardcore scene or about the Boston hardcore scene
yeah
or even about Michael Alago or whatever. I lived it. I breathed
yeah
it. I was in the trenches. I
yeah
knew the people. I took a couple lumps, like it gave a couple lumps, so it was done by somebody who lived it and breathed it and had accessibility, and that I think helped.
And you can totally see it, and I keep referring to that scene. You could totally see it, that you had that accessibility and that trust from
Yeah,
those guys, that you're not going, okay, I want you to walk in,
yeah, yeah,
and you're not telling stigma, show me your mosh, show me.
yeah. These are kids. These are kids I grew up with. I mean, these are
Yeah,
kids I was hanging out at the A7 with at 4 o'clock in the morning, in 1982. These are guys that when it was when it was a very small group of us,
yeah.
so and I've managed to, we've had a good relationship since then. But kind of the journey kind of the journey kind of goes like this, is that when I came back to New York and I started the High and the Mighty, and then I was an Antidote. One of the jobs that I had was I was a state first. I worked for Movie Equipment Rental House,
Hmm.
but then I was a stage manager on a film stage. The first one was in Queens, and then I was a stage manager at another one in Manhattan here. And my boss would say at a certain point, he said, "Hey, look, if you rent any of the film equipment inside the stage, like the lights, the stands, that stuff, if you rent any of the stuff outside the building, I'll split it with you." So I had a van and I started doing these little jobs, like my brother would come to town and need some stuff or this one or that one, and I throw some stuff in the van and I do a little job, and I put the money away, and I just managed to I managed to squirrel away enough money to start my film production company, Stone Films NYC.
Yeah.
Get a lawyer, incorporate it. Just got enough together to do that. Then I did a couple more jobs, and one of the people I met through doing being in the band and playing shows was a guy named Paris Mayhew, who was in a band called Chromax, right? And Paris, we were running in the same crowd, and me and Paris were friends. And Paris was going to, I think, the New School to be a cameraman, and he had aspirations to be a cameraman, which he did. He shot a bunch of stuff, and at a certain point, he came to me and said, "Hey, there's this band that's asking if I do a video for them. I don't know how to put it together. Do you want to put it together for me?" Now, it was one of those times in life where things just kind of clicked, because it was
Yeah.
just at that moment I just had the money together to put the payment down to get the $1 million insurance policy that you need in New York City to be able to rent cameras and get a permit from the mayor's Department of Film, right? So just as he said that, I sort of had the money. I was incorporated a bit before that and made the first payment. I had the insurance policy. Turns out the group was a group called Biohazard, and we did the video for Biohazard Punishment, and it was pretty successful. It was on MTV's Headbangers Ball, an unprecedented 14 weeks in a row. And then Biohazard was managed by Rush Management, which was Russell Simmons and them and Leor Cohen. and they had a group called Onyx, and somebody had the perspective. Let's get the rock and roll white boys to do the video for our song Slam.
Which
So
was
we did the Slam video. That went to double platinum. The video went to #1 on MTV. And then it was like, oh, Russell Simmons brother is Run from Run DMC. So we did the Run DMC video. And then, oh yeah, then we did the Typo Negative Black #1 video. So some dominoes started falling.
yeah.
Paris was and is a very, very talented filmmaker. And that ball started rolling, and we had a nice run. Me and Paris parted ways eventually, and I kept going, and I started directing as well, and I directed the Agnostic Front Gotta Go video. I directed the 2 Madball videos, Down by Law and Pride, and so on and so forth. Fury of 5, and even later on, I'm Sick of It All, and so on and so forth. And then eventually, that hand played out. Great, great, great times in the golden age of music video.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to bounce the ball back to you a little bit. I mean, your guys in Duran Duran know plenty about the golden age of music video. I mean, those guys had an incredible, with Russell McKay, they had an incredible run. It was the golden age of music video where anything went, you know?
Yeah.
And some of this stuff is a testament, to that, right? And your guys would tell you that, right? It was an exciting, vibrant, creatively boundless time, right?
Yeah. And I sometimes talk to I look after John Taylor, the bass player, and he tells me, like, sometimes he longs for that again.
Yes.
That people, because at the time it was them and Michael Jackson just battling who could make,
Yeah. And those guys, and this isn't my opinion, they were pioneers, of that era. The work that they did and those videos just opened up. Because when I was a stage manager at 3G, people would come in, and it was with the wildest shit. We want to, and I kid you not, we want to build a volcano on the stage, and then we want to do this. All right, you look at some of those early videos, and it's just, you look at me, go, what the fuck is this even about? I mean, there were so many videos that we worked on, and like,
this is a love song.
Like, what the fuck is this? There was all this sort of like imagery, and then this one, and so it was a really, really another. I mean, I'm extremely fortunate in that regard that I got involved in another really vibrant, exciting moment in art, culture, history, right?
Yeah.
And had this incredible run doing music videos and connecting with all these artists, right? Because I think a big part of my story is how things are so reciprocal, right? It's like in my story, it's like, things come back. It's like I'm part of the hardcore scene, and then I get involved in this music video world, and by then a lot of those hardcore musicians are still in hardcore or in other bands, and then they sort of go, well, Drew and Paris are in that game, let's have them do the music video.
Yeah.
And then even in the present, hosting the New York Hardcore Chronicles live, I've worked with so many people in that era. Not just, maybe I didn't do the music video, but maybe I was a stage manager. I was the stage manager at 3Gs when they did Danzig Mother. I was when they did Suicidal Tendencies, Give Me Your Money. So I connect Alice in Chains, Angry Chair. So there's all these different people I connected with. So now I'm doing this talk show, and it's like I could hey man, it's hey, you want to come on the show? And so it came back, and it was just fantastic,
Yeah. Speaking of New York Heart, your show, it's a live show, correct?
Yeah.
You have interviewed some legends. And like you said, you probably crossed paths with them early on. What's the most intimidating or surprising person you spoke with?
Well, it sort of blurs a little bit. Are we talking specifically about coming on my show, or does that also involve maybe people that have been in my films?
It could be both. Let's say,
Okay,
okay, let's
let's
combine
go
it.
with that. Let's go with that. So when I was directing the Who the Fuck Is That Guy? The Fabulous Journey of Michael Alago, I interviewed John Lydon, right, of the Sex Pistols. And that was exciting, nerve-wracking. Um, it was because there's a few people in my world that have really, really resonated with me. There's a couple of them, and I can name them on one hand. And John Lydon is one of them. John Lydon, Roger Waters, Bob Dylan, Ian MacKaye. There's Henry Rollins. There's a couple. So when it came time to shoot Lydon, I was a little nervous because also Lydon's history of being interviewed, he's destroyed people.
Yes.
He's destroyed people. And I looked up all this stuff and I'm seeing all this stuff on YouTube and I'm like, oh man, this could be fucked. So we go out to LA. We're out there. Alago's with me. And we reach out. He talks to John like the day before. Let's call it the day before. We're going out to interview John at his house, and he says, "Do we need?" Alago says, "Should we bring anything?" And Lydon says, "Bring me a bottle of tequila, a case of Corona, and a carton of Marlboro Reds." Right. So the next day comes, and I show up out of Malibu. I got the case of Corona. And it was a particular
Tequila.
like with the worm. Now,
Yeah.
me and Alago at this point, I'm clean and sober a long time. Alago even longer. But listen, this is what John wants. This is what it shows. And the card. So we show up. We walk in. He looks at me and he goes, oh, oh wow, you took me seriously. I was just kidding. Although I think it was really like the brown M&Ms, right? In the Van Halen rider. He
See if you
saw,
were paying attention.
and we were.
Yeah.
And he appreciated that.
Yeah.
And so it came time to interview him, and I was sort of at a loss where to do it, by the pool. And he goes, nah. He takes me under the foundation of his house. Like it's LA, it's kind of on stilts. And I shoot him against a brick wall. And we start talking. And we start talking about old New York. Because he used to live in New York City at a time, and I knew where he lived because I used to frequent a club that was right there. And I used to see him here and there at weird hours. And I knew he was a lover of old New York. And our conversation started, and we just started kicking it about New York within 10 minutes. Like it wasn't even an interview. It was like we were just kind of, laughing it up and talking about and what I realized about John is that so many people ambush him with like the Sid Vicious stuff and the Sex Pistols shit, and he's so sick of that shit that that wasn't even really.
It's almost like they're baiting him.
Exactly.
They want to see the monster.
And like that's not how I interview people. That's not how I behave, and that's not how I want to be treated.
Yeah.
I treat people the way I would want to be treated. So that turned out to be one of the most incredibly joyous moments of my career. And John and I are friends, and we've crossed paths a bunch of times since, and I really like the guy, Another one, of course, was Ian MacKaye, who was on the New York Hardcore Chronicles Live, who was really gracious to come on the show. He didn't need to. Ian MacKaye doesn't need to come on my show. he's good in his world. He shies away from a lot of the public stuff, but because we go way back together, he came on the show and it was great. It was one of the greatest shows I've done, and I was a little nervous him coming on. I got to admit, he's a big cultural influencer.
Of
So
course he is. Yeah.
yeah, so he was big in my world, and there's been a couple others that I mean, you know, that got me really excited. You know who got me really excited? I had Sam Cutler on my show. Sam Cutler was a tour manager for the Rolling Stones and for the Grateful Dead, and he was there. He was there for the Stones, Altamont, and then he was in the Dead camp for many years. I was really excited to talk to Sam. He passed away since, but like that one was really exciting to me because a lot of times with my show, I'm talking to like a lot of the old hardcore guys, or it's like I'm talking to my old, even the guys in Metallica, for the Alago film, the guys I've crossed paths with,
Yeah.
and so it's pretty informal, like you and me right now. But
Yeah.
there's a couple that is sort of like, ooh, as you know.
So,
I mean,
talking about Im Mackay,
yeah,
I know how you feel. Like you said, he didn't have to do it.
that's right.
We're a small podcast. We don't have a lot of subscribers. We do what we can, but we felt that when Keanu Reeves agreed to do it,
That's right.
and we were like, and I had crossed paths with him, like you had crossed paths with him.
I
He had
assume
kept it.
I assume you crossed paths with him working with Duran. Did Dog Star play with Duran at any point?
They did a festival. They was their first show in 22 years.
I figured that, yeah.
And they brought him to side stage. And while I'm doing my job, in the corner of my eye, I see him looking at the bass rig.
Sure.
And then it's almost like he got the courage to ask me a question about it. He came up and he goes, "What does that do?" And I started explaining it to him, and then he was telling me, he goes, "I'm still using the same gear from the 90s."
Oh my God.
And I said, "That amp's what you're using, the new version?" And I said, "Hey, have your tour manager reach out to me. I can connect you with some of these people." And he said, "Thank you." He was very, very, very kind. "Thank you for answering my questions." Then he comes back and hands me his phone and goes, "Hey, give me your number."
He seems like a very, very, really, really nice, down to earth, grounded guy.
He is. He's
and by the way, John Taylor has a great bass sound.
Thank you.
He does.
It's all in his hands, man.
Yeah, he's yeah. Hey, and as a side note, let me tell you that I talked about the band I was in, Antidote.
Mm-hmm.
The bass player, bass player in Antidote, one of my childhood friends, created the Sans Amp bass driver.
Oh, really?
Yeah, man.
That's the industry standard bass driver.
And we still have the cabinet and the head in our storage room. We still have the amp that the big, we call it, the Widowmaker, the refrigerator, the Ampeg. What is it?
Yeah.
The 610 or whatever.
8x10.
Yeah. And we still have the Ampeg cabinet, and we still have the head. The head is like like a cinder block, that thing. We still have it.
That's cool, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
That's an interesting side note.
Yeah. And he's actually involved in the production of our new record, the Incendiary Device record. And just for the record, he's involved with Fryette Amplification, with Fryette, and he's the one that bought the Sound City name. They relaunched Sound City.
Okay.
He's involved with that too.
Fryette makes great stuff, man.
100%, bro. That's why when we do our free all ages Sunday matinees at the Bowery, which we've been doing for a couple years, we backline it. People show up and go, "Whoa." Because we backline it with the Fryette gear and we try to create a really nice atmosphere for a lot of young bands who don't normally get treated with respect. Like you come to one of our shows, you get treated with respect. You play in front of you play with a great backline, with a great sound man, and we take care of you. And like I truly enjoy um, doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Coming up in Dallas, I worked at a lot of venues and we would do all ages shows on Sundays.
Sure.
And I always wondered why the house crew was so just like, "Ugh, let's get it over with." I'm like,
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
these kids can't get in on Friday or
Yep.
Saturday. Like this is their Friday night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think, and I know we're skipping around here,
That's
and
fine. That's fine.
some people might not be know what we're talking about, but basically once a month for the past bunch of years, we do these free all ages Sunday matinees down in New York City on the Bowery, right at Joey Ramone Place, in a place called the Bowery Electric, which is co-owned by a guy named Jesse Mallon, and it's 1 block away from CBGB's. And what we have there basically is in the spirit of the old CBGB matinee, the old CBGB hardcore matinees that we used to play, where the community and the culture come together, and the shows are free, and it's just an incredible breeding ground for uh, ideas in the community. And once a month we do it, and we try to just make it a really positive, fun, great event. And it's all ages, so a lot of young people come too. It's
Yeah.
cool, you know.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I want to touch back to your I wanted to ask you when you were talking about John Rotten. When you're interviewing, I watched the Michael Alago documentary, which I want to talk to you about as well,
Sure.
a while back, a few years ago. And then I recently watched it again
Thank you.
when we set this up. And it is a testament to not only you, but Michael's, how kind he speaks about you, about Michael, because I've seen the interviews you talk about. I've seen the public persona that people make him out to be, and he's so kind and complimentary and appreciative of that friendship.
Yeah.
You know, and
Well,
it's also a testament to you, you know, because
well, I think the Alago film was one of those moments where I'm not going to say I got lucky. I mean, I think luck might be part of it, but a lot of hard work went into it. But a lot of the stars aligned. And I'll tell you the story about Alago and how I got involved with Alago. Is that just like the title of the film? I used to go out in New York City in the late '80s, mid '80s, late whatever it was, and I just kept I just kept seeing this guy over and over again, whether it was like at CBGB's or backstage at the Garden or here or there, this like little feminine, uh, you know, gay guy, and I was like, who the fuck is that guy? He was everywhere. He was everywhere, and then I was managing a hardcore band called Sub Zero, and I got them on the Misfits European tour in 1997. I went out on that tour with my band, and Alago was on the tour because Alago had signed the Misfits to Geffen, and they put out American Psycho with the new singer Michael Graves. So Alago was out on the tour in Europe, and you know, when you're out touring with somebody and they're part of the touring party, and you're taking the boat ride from England to Cali, to Cali, and you connect with people and you get to know people. And and we got to know Alago. I got to know Alago, and then years later, he showed up at the premiere of my Boston hardcore film, and which I thought was really kind. And the Boston hardcore film did a nice run. He came to the premiere, which was in Boston at the Boston International Film Festival. And that film kind of ran its course, and I was thinking, what do I want to do next? And I ran into Alago at a Cro-Mag show, and I thought, that guy's got an incredible story. And so I reached out to him, and I said, hey, I want to get together with you and talk to you about something. He said, okay. And so I went over to his place. Now, this is the story that I like to tell, right? This is the version that I enjoy telling. He might have a little bit of a
I was going to say,
version.
does he have a different version?
Well, a little bit of a different version. And, for entertainment's sake, this is my story of
Okay.
this is my version of it, right? So I go to a Lago's apartment in the city, and I wasn't sure if like he was thinking like, what is this? Is this like a sex thing or something? Like what exactly is this? So I walked down the hall. I literally walked down like the gauntlet of penises at Alago's house because he just his walls are just covered by Robert Mapplethorpe stuff. He was a huge Robert Mapplethorpe fan and bought a lot of Mapplethorpe's work, and it's all framed. So I walk the gauntlet and I sit down and I'm talking to Alago, and I said, hey, thinking about, what do you think about me doing maybe a documentary film about your life? And he starts talking to me, and at one point he says to me, I just love music. And it was like that moment, like everything else just, it was like that moment. It was like that scene in Apocalypse Now when Dennis Hopper goes, and he meant it,
Yeah.
and I just, in that one moment, it just really hit me. I was like, yo, I know who this guy is. This is the kid I went to like public school with in the Bronx. Like, yo, all in one flash. Like, I could do this. I got this. I know what the fuck I'm doing. This is going to be great. I know who this person is, and I'm going to tell this story. And after that, we started a GoFundMe, and people like Cyndi Lauper and Rob Zombie and a couple other people stepped up and contributed, and we raised the money and we did the film, and the film was incredible. People were very gracious, including, of course, the guys in Metallica, who were really, for those that don't know Alago's story, Michael Lago has an incredible story. But at 21 years old, he got an A&R job at Elektra Records, and the first band basically he signed was motherfucking Metallica. You know?
Yeah.
So they were very gracious. They're in the film, and they were fantastic. And the film just, it's a good film, and I don't say that about everything I've done, but it
No.
has a first, like a first act, a second act, a third act. It is a fantastic film. I highly recommend it. It's on Amazon Prime
If
or
you haven't
Amazon.
seen it, you should
Yeah,
you
yeah,
should
you could find it.
yeah.
And Netflix picked it up. It was on Netflix for a couple years. It's off now, but that film was great. And having that film and the New York Hardcore Chronicles film come out. See, in this game, right? You do a film. It takes you a couple years. You put it out. You do you do sort of the promo thing, and then you take a breath and you start the next one. In this case, as fate would have it, the Mike, who the fuck is that guy? The Fabulous Journey of Michael Lago and the New York Hardcore Chronicles film came out within 2 weeks of each other, and it was a really, really, really. It was one of the most exciting times I've ever had as an artist. It was incredible. It was incredible. I was
Yeah.
going to premieres. It was a great, great, great ride.
Yeah. And like I said, I watched that movie several years when it came out.
Yeah.
And it's true. If you haven't seen that movie, you should watch it because it is a great film, a great documentary, and this guy is one of
Yeah.
the most interesting people
Yeah.
walking the earth right now.
It's an emotional film.
Yeah.
It's an incredible. It'll grab your heart. It's
Yeah.
a great film.
Yeah. And that's odd hearing the filmmaker going, it's a great, yeah,
Well,
but
I
it
don't say
is.
that. I don't say that about everything.
Yeah.
It's like I know the score.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and be like, you know what, XXX all ages. It's a great film. You know what? It's good.
Yeah.
A lot of people love it. I mean, I think it's pretty good, but the Alago film's great.
Right on, man. I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
Are there any documentary filmmakers or filmmakers in general that you still take inspiration from?
Werner Herzog. I mean, Werner Herzog is next to my dad. No one has influenced me as much as a filmmaker as Werner Herzog. And I'm not just talking about, aesthetically through the lens. I'm talking about overall attitude. about making films and dealing with actors and passion for the art. That stuff to me is almost bigger than what you see on the screen. But Werner Herzog is just another incredibly fearless filmmaker, and that really inspired me. And still, to this day. I mean, at this point, most of the stuff out there is just crap. It's like, I mean, all it's so rare that I see a film that I think is good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just me. I mean, I grew up, my dad, my part of the culture of me growing up with my dad, who was a filmmaker, was we'd go to the movies like a couple times a week. A week. I'd find myself in a movie theater with my dad a couple times a week, in the 70s, and so film. I've seen a lot of films, but I don't see much these days that's great. Now, I'm the last person that's going to be like back in the day. I can't stand that shit.
Yeah, yeah.
But really, I don't see that much. A lot of the stuff is just forced, and Hollywood stuff is just dreck and ugh,
Yeah.
I tell you what I saw that I really liked, that I thought that I really, really liked was Nosferatu.
Oh yeah, the Robert Eggers movie.
I enjoyed it very much. I thought it was very good.
Yeah,
I personally, I really enjoyed that film.
yeah, I really like his films. The
Yeah,
Northman was really, I really
yeah,
liked The Northman.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
if you weren't making films, if you weren't doing what you do, what do you think you would have ended up doing?
You mean if I wasn't in the art field at all?
Yeah,
Hmm.
or
That's
were
a
you
good.
kind of destined for the art?
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of like, it's like that scene in Officer and Gentleman, I got nowhere to
Eh,
go. Like I had nowhere to go. I sort of wandered the wasteland for a while as a young person. But I always wanted to be in a band, and I wanted to be an actor. I mean, there's nothing else that ever interested me.
yeah.
Seeing my dad work with actors as a young person, and my uncle was a film editor. He was an editor on Paul Newman film The Hustler, and you know and a whole bunch of other stuff. And my whole family was in and about the film business. And my brother's a cinematographer and filmmaker, and my cousin is a editor. I mean, it's kind of all I know. I don't know if it wasn't for music, film, and the art. I don't know.
Right on, man.
I really
That's an
don't.
honest.
I don't know. What
Yeah.
open a restaurant or um, I don't know. I just that stuff was always my great fear. That was always my great fear, is that
Yeah.
that I would have to do something like that with my life.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's legit, but that was, as a young person, like I had nowhere to go. I had to be creative. It's the only thing that brought me joy, you know?
Right on, man. That's an honest answer. I've got a
Yeah.
couple of more, and then I'm going to let you go, brother.
You don't have to, I don't have a heart out. So
Okay. Okay.
you could, we could do another 15 minutes or 20 or whatever works, man.
Best pizza slice in New York
Right now,
right now.
well,
If you got somebody coming into town and like take me to the best pizza place, where are you taking them?
Stromboli on St. Mark's and second on St. Mark's and First Avenue. Part of the reason is because it's still part of my sort of routine. Like I mentioned, when we do those all ages free matinees, me and my wife on the way home, part of our ritual, post gig ritual, is I double park in front of Stromboli's. I run in. I still know the people, that are behind the counter, and we get whatever we get in the box. I jump back in the car. We drive a couple blocks. I pull into a spot, and me and her sit in the car, after the euphoria of the gig is wearing off, me and her, and we sit there and we have our Stromboli pizza, and I think it's just part of our ritual, and it's part of my love for New York City. Stromboli is still there. I think it's great. What else? Joe's Pizza is,
Yeah.
the kind of pizza I grew up with in New York, which is like, yo, let me get a slice, and you just throw the slice in the oven, and like that style of pizza, I think is a dying art, right? It's like this the same way like bodegas and all that stuff are dying off because, or even diners. All the great diners are now like, gourmet, whatever. Like the bodegas now are like gourmet markets, and
Yeah.
the diners they call like, uh, you know, whatever. It's not a diner anymore,
No.
So pizza is like, oh, it's oven fried, it's this or that. So a lot of the old school traditional way of New York pizzas. There's another place in the Bronx where I used to live, Sam's on 231st Street off Broadway, which is still a dump, hole in the wall. They just throw the pizza in and like, you know. So yeah, pretty much.
My favorite part of your answer is I'm talking to you. I hear you're a New Yorker, but when you talk about New York, you throw on the typical, hey,
Listen,
give me a slice.
throw the fucking thing in the oven. So, but we have a saying in New York these days because a lot of people are gone. Oh, it ain't what it used to be, and this and that. For those of us that are still here, the saying is New York City. It ain't what it used to be, but it's the only place for me.
Oh man.
You know,
Right
and like,
on.
you know what I mean. The wave goes in and the wave goes out here. There's ghosts. There's ghosts for me on every corner now. I mean, I grew up here. This is where my friend got stabbed. This is where that phone booth is where I got dumped when I was a teenager. You know what I mean? Like, and I've worked through all that, and I still love it here. It's still great, even with the current like really crazy atmosphere of what's going on in New York. Oh, my
Yeah.
dad has a good one too. Um, the only thing about New York that stays the same is that it's constantly changing.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
That is a good one, man.
Yeah, yeah,
Right on, man.
yeah, yeah,
I love that.
yeah.
What do you got working on? What do you got going on now? What are you working on? Anything new?
Yeah, there's a couple balls in the air. I have a book that you know what? Hold on, let me grab it. Hold on. So this one's worth mentioning. This is pretty incredible. So I have a book that's coming out. It's in pre-order now. It's called London 77, The Lost Archive, The Photography of Gregory Rudolph Smith. So basically, Greg Smith is a guy that started as a production assistant with my dad and ended up being my dad's cameraman. And then later on, he was the cameraman behind all this stuff that we did, Onyx and all that. And in 1985, he showed me a portfolio he had um, of photographs. And apparently, he was in London a few years before he came here to New York, and he showed me these pictures. And these pictures were all this 1977 punk scene stuff. And he showed them to me once, and then he ended up being my dad's cameraman. But and then eventually he moved to Cambodia where he became a doctor. He left New York. But I would see him from time to time. I would see him like once a year or whatever when he came back to New York. And I always asked him, whatever happened to those negatives, whatever happened to those photographs? And he told me, they basically at a certain point he said, all the stuff's in a storage room in Baltimore, and it's all going to get thrown out. He says, when I'm back here in a year, for everything your family has done for me, your father gave me a career. I'm going to gift these to you and your family. So a year later, he comes back and he gives me 3,500 never before seen negatives from the early London punk scene. And these are incredible. Don Letts, the director Don Letts, um, Speaking of John Lydon, John Lydon's stepdaughter, who passed Ari up from the Slits.
Uh-huh.
You know, these have never before been seen. And the one that really, really cool stuff, Susie and the Banshees. And what I'm showing you here is the book proof right now,
Yeah.
because it's at the printer. But one that really that I really love is and this is the photo that 30 years later I never ever forgot. And because even then I knew who this guy was. Billy
That's
Idol.
cool. Yeah,
This
that's a
is
great shot.
this is generation X.
X.
So many years in the making. Scanned the photos, got comments from everybody in the book, and the book is in pre-order right now. You can order it at Generation Records here domestically. Just look up Generation Records, London 77, or punch in my name. And outside of the United States, it's available. Cortex Records has it. So that book, the book it's a vanity project. It's a labor of love. So, but I'm so excited that it's seeing the light of day. I mean, this is an incredible, incredible bit of music history. This stuff was going to end up in a dumpster.
Yeah.
And for it to come back around is just so incredible. On that front, I'm singing Antidote. Eventually, the band that was in Antidote eventually was rebranded and morphed into a band. We are Incendiary Device now, and we have a whole bunch of shows coming up. We're playing Punk Rock Bowling in May, Crash Fest in San Francisco in June. We're doing a new record right now. It's being mixed pretty soon. This guy Dan Kornoff is going to be involved in the mix. Well-known guy, and playing a lot of shows. Still deriving a lot of joy from playing music and getting out there. And as far as film stuff goes, it slowed down a little bit. I sort of lost a little bit of passion for raising money, spending a year or two or three to make a film, giving it to a distributor, getting screwed. After doing 5 films, I'm a little sort of winded. And I think what has taken its place is my show, the New York Hardcore Chronicles Live, which was a totally unexpected turn in my life. It started from my dad's kitchen during the pandemic, and it just took off. And the show is just a beloved worldwide show. It's got sponsors, and it's live, and it's got a community behind it. And in a lot of ways, that has taken the place of my passion of making films and interviewing people in films, because I interview people every week on my show, and I'm connecting with people. And the faces have changed, but the game remains the same in a lot of ways. And just doing my thing, doing the shows down at the Bowery Electric, the free all ages matinee shows. I just got married recently to someone I love very much, and spending time with her and doing stuff. And I'm very, very grateful for what I have. I really am. I've had a really great run, and I'm surrounded by wonderful people. I'm thankful for that.
Man, that's good to hear. It's good to hear. I hear it in your voice. Where can people find you online?
Hey, it's easy. You could just Google Drew Stone and I come up, or on Instagram, it's Stone Films NYC.
Yeah.
But if you just Google Drew Stone, it all comes up.
Oh man, all of it comes up.
The good and the bad. But it's all out there. And I think it harkens back to what you opened the show with. I'm an accessible person, and like I said, handed down from my dad. And I think that's a big part of, if you want to call it, the success I've had, is that that if somebody reaches out, I respond, and I like meeting new people, and I like communicating with everybody out there. It's one of the joys of my life.
Right on, man.
Yeah, man.
Well, brother, I appreciate you taking time to do this. Like
My
I
pleasure.
said, I thank TJ for connecting us. I
It
thank
was T.
Danny
It
for
was T.
connecting us.
It was TJ, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm gonna.
I hooked up TJ's film. What was it? Roadie My
Yeah,
Story.
that's a great documentary too.
I hooked him up with the distributor who distributed the Alago film.
Okay,
Yeah.
right on, man.
Yeah. So I'm happy for DJ that his film got a film that he put so much into and so much love that it's found an audience. I'm
Right
happy.
on, man. Yeah. He mentioned that.
Yeah.
I'm going to end on this. Our podcast, it's called "Is Breakfast Included?" And when we have breakfast, I'm going to say that. What do you have?
I would say these days, I what did I have? I had scrambled eggs and an English muffin. But usually breakfast for me these days is I'm a big juicer these days. I make like funky juices with the press,
Yeah.
you know, so that's kind of my thing. I keep it light. I'm on this thing now where I don't eat before 12 and after 6.
Eh,
And I'm kind of on this thing now. You know, I try to eat light and healthy at noon, and then usually for dinner I kind of overdo it a little bit. But that's sort of how I behave. And yeah, so thank you so much for having me on. It was so nice to talk to another great knowledgeable music person who actually did his homework. Because
Thank you, man.
I go on some shows and it's incredible how sometimes people just don't have the common courtesy to sort of like do their homework, and I come on there, I'm like, what am I even doing on here, you know?
Well, thank you. It was an honor for me to have you. I'm an admirer of your work, so
Thank
it
you.
was an honor for me to have you. Anyways,
Okay,
it was good talking to you,
it
buddy.
was good talking to you. All the best to you and your people.
Likewise.
All right, take care.
Right on, Drew Stone. If you want to find out more about Drew, check out stonefilmsnyc.com. Everything you need to know is right there. And while you're at it, check out some of his movies. I highly suggest Who the Is That Guy? The Fabulous Journey of Michael Alago. It's one of my favorite documentaries. While you're online, check out isbreakfast.com. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram from there, and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review the show on Apple Podcasts. And you know what's coming next. Pick up a shirt. Yeah, even if you have one, it's probably all ratted out because you wear it all the time. Pick up another one. All right, guys, I want to thank Drew for taking time to do the show this week. I'm done. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next week.